whYY is my favorite card game ever made, as is the birth of my waifu Tama, for whom I have dedicated this channel name to. And it was killed after a measly 3 years with a whimper in English. I'm Tamanon, welcome, I talk about anime and anime card games, and today I'm upset. Having released in 2014 in Japan, the card game by Takara Tomy, which many may now know from their other properties like Duel Masters, which continues to top Japanese game slots, or Beyblade, which is still a media empire of itself, whYY has had more success than maybe it should have. The game started relatively strong in Japan, often keeping in the top 10, although the bottom half in sales. The game is based on a personal favorite anime of mine, Selector Infected whYY, written by Mary Okada, you might know from Black Rock Shooter, Anohana Another Flower, Gundam IBO, Makia, and just many more. Directed by Sato-san, who also directed the Steins Gate adaptation, the game was designed by Shota Yasuka, a Hall of Fame pro MTG player who went on to also work on Final Fantasy, Shadowverse, and the Flesh and Blood card games. The gameplay was something most who tried it lauded as very strong, some saying that whYY was one of the best designed core roles for any TCG ever, and well, personally, I'm inclined to agree. The biggest hurdle against the game that probably stopped it from getting higher in ranking sales, but also cemented it in its place in top 10 for so long, paradoxically, was the Bishoujo or beautiful girl art. Every card is a beautiful or cute anime pinup style girl. While many lauded the gorgeous art, this is also partially why the game would never reach certain audiences who wanted dragons with tank wings, or big burly sexy men shooting lasers out of their arms, or those post-COVID anime fans who are afraid of a 4-letter word. However, the core audience it did find, from those who love the anime, or the amazing pinup art, or the tight difficult to master gameplay, held very strong in Japan. In the West, the IP was just flat a failure. The dub was frankly just not good. It was streamed in a time when anime streaming had just begun and anime was not post-COVID mainstream. Funimation did a number on its online release with poor quality uploads, bad subtitles. If it wasn't for one group, Asenshi Subs, and the main translator at the time, who was a huge Mario Kata fan, it may have never gotten a good release the West could enjoy at all. Truly a labor of love. While it gained a sort of small cult following on a certain niche internet subforum or two, when the sequel series came out, Lost Rage and Diva, that were written, directed, and animated by completely different teams, even those venues went into silence. On the TCG side, Takara Tomy had only worked with card games in the past with Wizards of the Coast, who killed Duel Masters in the early 2000s, and they had not released any TCG on their own in the West. It didn't seem like whYY would ever get an English release. The dedicated Wikipedia for whYY FAQ had a segment dedicated to this, where the frequently asked English TCG release when was answered never. Those in the West were delegated to playing JPN if they could read it, or simulators like Cockatrice, or simply collecting their favorites as I did with Tama. Yet, 7 years later, during COVID lockdowns worldwide, the improbable happened. In November 2021, Takara Tomy released English whYY with the Diva anime and gameplay reboot. While the small niche community was very excited, everyone was obviously also confused. The best guess anyone had for why was maybe the uptick in card game fever COVID lockdowns created, with Pokemon and MetaZoo going off the shelves, but honestly we will never know and can only speculate. Unfortunately, this was the beginning of all the issues. Like the whYY anime itself, the English release was doomed to a monkey paw wish come true. To start, this was during COVID lockdowns. Many stores for card games that require in-person play closer than 6 feet were closed or didn't allow actual play. While many card shops were already struggling, whYY English was being distributed by whYY Card World, which to many a store who hadn't dealt with prior might find just a little shady. I know personally a few local gaming stores, or LGS, that were thinking of getting product, but an old email contact form and a weird way of ordering seemed shady, so they just didn't. As whYY Card World also distributed it for Card Fight Vanguard, a game that LGS have various thoughts of sales-wise, many were just overall hesitant to pick up whYY boxes. Most LGS who did stock whYY, which USA-wide there were probably like less than 20 to start, were either those whose owners were a fan of the property themselves, or those who had dealt with whYY before and were looking for the next Pokemon type hype, so this kind of meant the initial store interest was very low. whYY World would often forget, quote unquote, right, to send monthly promos to shops, only to conveniently have the promos later when trying to sell unsold cases of sets no one wanted. This greatly discouraged players from showing to LGS to play, and inadvertently killed many growing WIXOSS communities who would find greener, more promo-filled pastures in the slew of other card games being released. whYY also conveniently forgot to send many stores their box promos. For example, Welcome Back Selector P06 set, which at the time of its release, the buy a box promos were being sold on the secondary market for $80 to $100, and some people just conveniently their cases never came with them. Wanting to win promos often drives players to go to stores, especially in small games like this where it might take you forever to get to a shop that hosted events. For example, I was driving up to an hour weekly just to play. So imagine taking an hour to get somewhere only to be told the distributor never sent that month's promos, only to see that same distributor giving away said promos to sell old boxes in a few months. It really killed many potential players' motivations. Many players and LGS owners tried to contact Takara Tomy about these issues to just crickets. No response. And I personally know of multiple LGS or local game shops that, after the silence and unchanging distributor, and all the scummy stuff that went with it, decided to can purchasing and supporting play for WIXOSS altogether. Unfortunately, Takara Tomy continued to drop the ball repeatedly. The release for the game in COVID was a bad start, but to make matters worse, the sets were a full year behind Japan's, meaning the meta was solved months before the sets were even released. Due to this, players knew when a bad meta would be, or which sets would be useful to purchase, especially long term. This led to many boxes sitting on shelves of the few shops stocking the game in the first place. As a player, this also meant you got a limited amount of space to brew new decks with. People find different reasons to enjoy card games, from collecting to playing to community, and some are very much into brewing decks. In an unsolved meta, you get to experiment and try new things. In a solved meta, and a year out is very, very solved, brewers don't have really that opportunity. It didn't help that many of the diva characters weren't super popular, which was highlighted by the only set to truly ever get hard to get and sell out being Welcome Back Selector P06, which was the initial release featuring the original Selector infected anime OG girls in it. Every other box in the game almost immediately bargain binned, with LGS making almost zero profit or losing money by stocking at all, which as a business isn't really where you want to be. I recall buying boxes for as low as the $15 to $30 range at one point, and eventually most LGS who still wanted to support the WIXOSS community and at all went to a if players order it, I'll order it for them mentality, which meant no product on shelves, so no one to see it, and people would just try a different game. While all this occurred in the background, the game did grow at first. My LGS had a good run on 12 to 20 some coming in for weekly parties. Ceremony events would cap at almost 30 players, and some LGS ran special party events giving out promos that were just crazy fun. Some of the early promos like Art Gain and Lancelot, due to how good they were in the game and the art, even went for like $50 to $120 each, which looking back is astonishing, as the end state of the game where those prices were regulated to the top 16 prizes at GPs, if that, for promos. Now, a GP, or Grand Prix, let's talk about that. The initial Grand Prix, anyway, in which I did a hour-long documentary interviewing players, and even those from Takara Tomy who were supposed to be supporting the game, was a load of fun. This is when I got the opportunity to speak with the English side WIXOSS producer from Japan, working for Takara Tomy, and asked about promoting the game. COVID was just out of people's minds. We had a large-scale event in Vegas. How about some promotion for the game? I had been doing everything I could to get people to know the game even existed, from leaving free structure decks at conventions, to giving away entire decks to new players at locals, to filming and editing gameplay. Multiple other people had been doing the same, from streaming weekly events to metagame discussion. Everyone was just so passionate, but at a point there is only so much a player base can do to get people interested. I asked about production from Takara Tomy, if we could ever get Takara Tomy to promote at anime conventions like they do with Beyblade, and how similar properties do for other card games. I even let them know we had plenty who would gladly do it for free, including myself, and was met with a very positive no. They had no plans to promote sans what they were already doing, which at the time was a Facebook post sometimes. With no new anime, with the OG anime being regulated to cease team streaming or pirates like myself, and zero physical card game promotion if you didn't happen upon it on YouTube or one of the 20 local game stores in over 300 million square miles of America, the chances for a new potential player to even know WIXOSS existed may as well have been zero. And even if they did see it collecting dust on a shelf or 4 people playing, why would they pick that up over, say, a game they saw getting swarmed at an anime convention with similar art and player base? Takara Tomy wasn't interested in answering this problem, honestly, from the get-go. Now, the GPs were fun. For many in the player base, they seemed to be the breath of fresh air they waited eagerly for. Top prizes included cool alt art promos that could fetch a decent price. Just for showing up, you were given event-exclusive playmats. The events were run very well at good venues, and the judge team were all very passionate WIXOSS lovers who really, truly cared for the events in game. In 2024, GP started having the top 2 players get an invite to Japan's top WIXOSS event, the Mugen Shoujo. However, I need to put this into some perspective. America is large, over 3 million square miles. Flying from one state to another can cost anywhere from $200 to $1,500 just in plane flights, not counting the hotels, food, transportation, and taking off work. For many English players, it might literally have been cheaper to fly to Japan for 2 full weeks than to attend one weekend GP whose top prizes, even if you wanted to sell them, might only be a few $100s at best. People going to these events went because they loved the game and desperately wanted it to continue, not because they could potentially win big. This sort of semi-casual love for the game feeling was very present in GP1, where they did a top LRIG prizing, where even if you scrubbed out, you could get a prize if you scrubbed out with the best of a specific character that you loved. Unfortunately, this did not continue. There was also a lack of side events, even if they tried to have them, due to a multitude of unfortunate events ranging from the side event prizing getting stuck in Canadian customs, or Y2K shutting down air travel. The point here is that it was an expensive endeavor with very little to gain even if you won. Ah, but I just said you won an invite to play in Japan if you topped, right? Yes, but at your own expense. Unlike other TCG top prizing where you might get compensated flight or lodging or pretty much anything, your win at getting invited meant you would need to cough up the dosh yourself, pay the minimum 1,000 flight to Japan, and that's being generous here, take a 16 plus hour flight there, pay for your own food and lodging, and then compete. Compete being a very key word because you are playing with Japanese cards in a Japanese meta a year out from what you were just playing against people who not only know the language but get to play that meta weekly. Is that even a competition or more like a pity prize, right? Then you get to spend the 16-20 some hours flying back. What a great prize to be out thousands of dollars to get dunked on after spending potentially the same amount to even qualify. I know those who did end up going were happy to. I personally would have loved to go myself, but the issue here is the tone deafness of Takara Tomy regarding it as a prize when the situation at home was so dire. For example, one of the final nails in the coffin for WIXOSS as a English TCG actually started much earlier. Sometime around the 7th set, a stranger going by Zuka and sometimes Tama on various platforms like Facebook Marketplace and Discord was popping up having a strange amount of high-end cards. The kind of high-end cards you could open cases and cases and packs and packs and boxes and really never see. Yet somehow he always had at least one of each high-end card before a set would even release. He initially came on the scene claiming to only have one of each high-end due to his cousin trying to find serial cards. Eventually though, those buying from him started to get really skeeved that a random dude in Hong Kong was always opening multiples of the same cards, so rare some of us have opened cases upon cases of each set and never even seen one. So very quickly people started talking and it was found out he had at least 6 of each of the high-end cards, but magically had 0 of the 8 included in a box super rares or bulk cards. The strangest part being that the cards by all metric were real. Somehow, despite never having the bulk commons or uncommons or rares or parallel foils or box toppers or really any kind of bulk at all, he always had a multiple of the ultra rare shiny bubblegum cards that may be only 1 in every 1,000 cases or something. It was just basically a mathematical improbability. These cards in Japan can fetch an upwards of 1,000 USD or more, and he was selling them for like $300 to $600 and could easily kind of be talked down. People kept pressing the guy for answers, and everyone received various degrees of different stories. Oh, my cousin, my brother, my dog gave them to me. And Zuka became kind of known as Sus Guy. The issue here is that now even the whales weren't buying boxes. Why buy boxes when you can buy the cards you want cheaper than a case? So the one main supporter of LGS who still stocked WIXOSS started to dwindle even further, as the whales who used to buy multiple cases each set would just buy from Zuka. The breaking point came when Zuka showed items he wasn't supposed to have. Serialized cards with no numbered serial and weird foil patterns. This was proof to many, myself included, that he was stealing from the line to some capacity. This further incentivized people to not buy boxes. What if he had taken all the possible good hits from the boxes? Box prices continued to tumble and LGS increasingly dropped the game. There were many other shady things going on related to this guy in the Facebook group, ran by a specific mod who, when myself and others informed the situation in hopes Zuka got banned, immediately told the guy. I know this as I got some angry words from Zuka upset I was letting others know of his shady dealings. After 2 years of this going on, with myself and many others investigating and gathering information that is ridiculously damning, Takara Tomy did nothing. We reached out to everyone we could, including some private individuals who did try, but it seemed by this point English WIXOSS was already a ship without a sail. The emails never gained any responses. The prior English producer had been moved to Hanna Lorcana at Takara Tomy, allegedly, or in any case completely silent and unavailable for contact. There was no one to stop this clear theft. At one point, thanks to the greed of Zuka showing some very impossible to get articles, like multiple SP rarity, which are so rare they're basically supposed to be 1 per set, like a cereal almost, something moved. We were finally told that it appears someone was stealing the quality control cards from the print factories, and matters had been taken to damage them so that it would stop occurring, or at least be more obvious when this was happening. Unfortunately, by the time they stopped Zuka, which, make no mistake, it did stop immediately after, with Zuka no longer having product to steal and sell, it was far too late. Takara Tomy's complete lack of care that their high-end cards were being stolen and sold for pennies destroyed any of the small value left in the discounted boxes and had done irreparable damage to the trust in the game. All the while, local game shops were dropping the game. Whether that was the distributors screwing them over, the players leaving to greener pastures, boxes sitting on shelves costing them money, the writing was on the wall. Now, I've played my fair share of dying and dead card games. The list is huge. Games come into fruition and die all the time, no matter how good they are, or even if the companies handled them well. So the signs to me were unfortunately very blatant. It was practically screaming in our face when the last of the non-GP events called ceremonies were dropped. These for many were the only big events people had. For example, my local card shop could garner 20 or so people for ceremonies, even way towards the end. They had good promo prizes and really were just a good excuse to play at your best with your local friends from various shops coming together. Then those were silently dropped. Eventually the weekly parties stopped mattering completely to some, as the promos were backlogged old promos and we never got new ones, and there's nothing really building up. And you really didn't even know if you would get the promos if the distro sent them, or didn't. The final herald of the end was a 4-ish month gap between the last 2 sets to release, which made an already slow time feel like an actual forever. Then the drought, where there was 0 updates to the website and no news of the next set for months. This leads to now. It's been almost 5 months as of making this video and no new set. The next set, P24, was one many had been excited for. It was the return of a popular card type from before the soft reboot that English players had never got to experience. It was a return of many beloved characters, including my waifu Tama, and some of her best card and art that would have been in English yet. And even not in English, I was so excited I got a few boxes and opened them on this channel, as well as some of the goods that came with it. It was a huge celebration in Japan of the 10th year of WIXOSS. 10 years for a TCG is a big round number, and had many English fans chomping at the bit for its release, promising 5 new starter decks with value reprints to get new players into the game. I had planned on a new How to Play in 5 Minute video explaining the changes to the rules for potential influx in renewed interest, as well as gathering cards from other hopeful players to begin giving away more free decks at various anime conventions. And then, zilch, complete radio silence. No Facebook updates with art showcasing the giant set to come out. No webpage updating showing all the cool cards to be released. Worse and most damaging of all, even the distributor didn't seem to know what was going on and had received no information on the next set release. Myself and others contacted every avenue we could, only to be told it couldn't be discussed. At a certain point, a large number of Japanese players all began to direct message me on various platforms. They all asked me not to share the information, fearing it would get back to them, but it's been months and it was more than 5 different distinct people saying the exact same thing. So now this is essentially speculation, but because of the similarity of story and the trustworthiness of the players who I have no reason to think they were lying to me. Essentially, their dad works for Nintendo and said the tariffs are why they can't make the new English set and the game is gonzo. Most of these messages were post-tariff announcement, and while we still have not heard an official report from Takara Tomy on why the English WIXOSS was killed exactly, this seems like a very obvious and easy out for the company. They no longer had to blame all the problems they allowed to occur and the lack of attempt they made to have English WIXOSS be a success. They merely had to blame greedy American politicians who hate glorious Japan. They did nothing wrong. Reading these messages and seeing others later on Japanese Twitter and other avenues blaming the tariffs instead of 3 years of mismanagement enrages me. Yes, the tariffs could have been the final nail where Takara Tomy decided it wasn't profitable anymore, but time-wise, does that even really make sense? At the point in which the tariff increase was made, the next set P24 we never got was already supposed to have been released. So if it was the tariff's fault, where's the warehouse full of English printed P24 boxes? Where are the translated card previews and poster previews? Why was the distributor never even told, prepare for the set? With the given information, surely a set with 5 new starters celebrating the 10th anniversary would have been a great deal of prep work made long before it was set to release. The idea that Takara Tomy waited to translate, print, ship, and promote an entire set 2 weeks prior to the release date is absurd. Trying to shift blame to the tariffs doesn't make sense within the context of the release schedule, and if it were true, wouldn't they just sell the P24 English boxes to Southeast Asian market, already getting the English sets rather than let them waste in a warehouse? And if it's just USA tariffs, why not send to Canada or the EU still? It just makes zero economic sense and time sense. While all this was occurring, Takara Tomy congratulated Chinese WIXOSS in a video cross-platform for their anniversary, while we couldn't even get a thank you for playing apology for the end of service. As of this week, September 16th, we finally got a end of service announcement that said nothing about why. Personally, I wonder if it's because of the large Japanese player focus article written about English by some prominent English WIXOSS lovers. I'll link below, making the tariff patsy not very applicable. Maybe Takara Tomy felt it was just smarter not to say anything at all. But they still found one last knife to stab us with by scheduling a final GP. Yes, one last end of service GP should be great, right? Except they had scheduled it for November 29th, the day after Black Friday, Thanksgiving weekend. The only way they could have possibly scheduled a worse event timing would have been Christmas. So players get to decide between spending time with grandma or spending an absurd flight price on one of the most busy airport weekends in the country to battle their way through upcharge Ubers to upcharge hotels that may already be sold out because it's a major holiday, to play a confirmed dead game where unless it's cash money prizes has zero way to even pretend to pay for itself. It's a final nail in the coffin on just how inept Takara Tomy is as a company, and anyone on the top end remotely involved in these decisions should step down or be fired or stuck in a small back room of busy work while their coworkers shame them into quitting. Now, as of the 24th of September, they have announced that they're changing the date, and to keep tuned because I guess enough people, were very vocal about the fact that, hey, no one's going to be able to show up to this. So at least there's that small victory potentially. However, it doesn't even really matter because it just shows that Takara Tomy has blundered heavily, and if they ever think they'll be able to release a new card game in English, They should really rethink the damage they did to their company name here. With this, as far as I'm concerned, the English WIXOSS IP is just laid to rest. RIP WIXOSS Global, it was stillborn, never really given a chance. I began this channel to promote WIXOSS English. My first videos were about how to play the game, and gameplay made easy to give people a quick entry point. I grew to really enjoy making content and talking with WIXOSS players, or as we call each other, selectors. It's hard to think of all the could have beens if the company had cared as much as the players had. The gameplay is amazing, the art's fantastic, the card quality and foiling is just gorgeous. It truly blows any TCG on the market by a mile. I'm sad to see English go and will not be keeping up with the Japanese meta. Before the English release, I only cared about collecting Tama and rarely looked at gameplay past the Legacy format All-Star. I will just crawl back into that hole and continue to collect my favorite card foo and think fondly of the fun times that were had. I've made some great friends through the shared love of WIXOSS, and picked up editing as a hobby, which I've been branching out into other avenues to talk and work on, like the seasonal anime videos. I'll continue making those as long as it's fun, and talk about what other anime or card games pique my fancy. It's just, none will ever be WIXOSS. Rest in peace, WIXOSS. May Mayu find you. Amen.